time for Joan Esposito. Live, local, and progressive.
Joan, as always, exceptional work from you from, your TV days all the way up to today. You're truly exceptional, and thanks for this great show you have.
It's time for Joan Esposito on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk.
Hey, thanks for being here this Monday, April 7th. Were you able to get out to one of the protests over the weekend? It is estimated. I've seen, thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands. Most of the organizations that were behind the hands-off protest, Indivisible, Move On, they are saying that nationwide, they're estimating 5.2 million people. 5.2 million people marched. There were huge crowds in Chicago, huge crowds in Boston, huge crowds in New York. One of the people who was out there in the crowd here in Chicago is our very own Saturday host, Edwin Eisendrath, who joins us now to talk about that. Hey, Edwin, how are you?
Hello, Joan. I'm good.
Tell me what it was like, what you saw. And for those of you who are wondering why I'm not telling you what I saw, I actually months earlier had committed to a wedding on that day, so I was not able to join this particular protest. I've been to some before, and I will no doubt be there again, but I was not out there this Saturday. Edwin was. So, Edwin, what'd you see?
Well, first, no need to apologize for being at a wedding. Good news is needed, and it comes in all forms, whether that's at a wedding or with a couple 100,000 of your closest friends on the street.
Well, it was a pretty big wedding. I felt like I was with a couple 100,000 people, my closest friends there.
Look, Joan, I love being out there. I mean, there was excitement. There was a good bit of outrage. There was an awful lot of determination and some very creative sign and costume work, I thought.
I saw a lot of signs. I didn't see any costumes. What costumes were there?
Well, there were, for instance, somebody came as Marie Antoinette, on this sort of royalty theme. It was, kind of fun. But we could update our shtick a little bit. The speeches were, not it was missing some things. For instance, there wasn't voter registration for people right there, and there wasn't much of a call to action. Here are the three congressmen everybody go home and reach out to today. There are things we all can do, and I talk about them and you talk about them, and I wish that in the event, people talked about them too, but that's a small complaint. What's really important is that so many people are seeing each other and they're seeing other Americans who aren't afraid, like corporate America is, of the monsters in the White House.
Yeah, though I will say there appear to be some cracks with all of this tariff stuff and the Wall Street Journal reporting how stocks are up 1 second and down the next. Here, Wall Street starts to speak out against Trump's tariffs. Wall Street Journal, Jamie Dimon warns tariffs will raise prices, slow growth. Elon Musk knocks Trump's trade philosophy. Woo.
I mean, they're all just so incompetent and destructive. That's just, we need to be rid of them, and we will. But things like this, I had the distinctly unhappy experience of watching Fox and Friends this morning. Ooh. And, so after I listened to them, I double checked, because they said we all got paid by George Soros for being at the protest, and I looked and I can't find my check. I don't know what happened.
Ray was telling me that a long time ago, Stephanie Miller had George Soros on as a guest, and she said to him, "George, I hear you're paying for all these protesters." She said, "Could I have a check?" And he was like, "No." No. So it's right. So they said that, and they said, the people didn't know why they were there. I heard that too this morning, and that's interesting. And it's interesting because it's a commentary
about our communication skills. Because the truth is, when you ask people why they were there, they have hundreds of reasons to be there. And some are there because they care about trans rights. Some people were there because they care about the rule of law. Some were there because they're worried about immigrants. Some were there because their 401ks just crashed, right? That's the thing about a coalition. You bring lots of people together for lots of reasons, but they agree on what we need to do. And so they're going to say, oh, we didn't know why they were there. Oh, yes, everybody knew why they were there.
Yeah, really.
Yeah.
Do you watch Fox often?
No. But some.
Yeah, I'm glad you do. Somebody should. I can't. I just can't. I can't watch Fox. I can't listen to the sound clips that they post on social media. Yeah. It just sickens me. Anyway, are there any signs that you can say on the radio what was on the sign? Because I've seen a lot of signs that were really, really good and not fit for radio.
I saw a bunch, but some of them, I said to him, wow, where'd you think of that? It was a really interesting sign. I don't even remember what it said now, but I remember being impressed in the moment. And I asked him, he said, oh, and my wife saw that on the internet. Mm-hmm. So, everybody's working towards the same thing. These ideas are out there. We are working together. The signs were the L ride was fun, going downtown, because everybody on the L was, of course, going for this. And, there was, nobody would have worn a MAGA hat on that L train. But there were little kids with their parents, and there were, old folks, and everybody was like, where do I get off? And I'm like, oh, let's get out of Washington. You'll be right in the thick of it. It was just a moment where people felt like I can do something. I have a voice. I don't have to sit by and let this happen in a country I love.
Were any of the speakers elected officials, or were they just activist organizers? Some congressmen got shout-outs, but the speakers were all organizers, labor and activist organizers. So they were speaking from the perspective of that which they're organizing, and that's different. It's a different audience. But again, this is a coalition. You want everybody there, and everybody's got a piece of it. I believe somebody was like, marches don't accomplish anything. I think we're at a point where we want to focus our energies on all of the above. Yes, let's call our legislators. Let's show up at their offices. Let's send emails. Let's fill out witness slips. Let's go to marches. I don't think there is a bad way to be engaged right now.
I agree with you, Joan. I heard the same thing, and I heard somebody say, well, Cory Booker, what good did that do? Mm-hmm. Okay, seriously, the other guys have all of the power, all of it. So you can't, this is guerrilla warfare or asymmetrical warfare. They have complete control. It's not like Democrats can go in and just vote no and have it carry the day. That's not how this works, because we don't have the votes. So we have to do everything, and we have to remind everybody that they aren't helpless, because we're going to get another shot at voting soon. And when we do, we can throw these terrible people out and begin to repair some of the damage.
How big would you estimate the crowd was in Chicago?
Well, I'm terrible at that, but look, the Daily Plaza was full, and by full I mean full like a train car gets full. There was no room. It was packed. And then it spilled out about a block in any direction, another all the way around. So, wow. I don't know, 20,000, maybe 30,000. But I'm not very good at that.
Yeah, I suck at that as well. It's really hard. But I've seen some of the pictures, and it was so impressive.
Day at Wrigley Field, and that's about 30,000.
I know that Donald Trump seems to be actively avoiding any information that thwarts the direction he wants to go. But, I'm wondering, with the marches like this, with the protests like this, and with the few Republicans that have town halls and get screamed down, I wonder when Republicans are going to realize that their seats, their re-elections are in jeopardy if they don't start some opposition of their own. Do you think this crowd size here is making an impression on the people who need to grow a spine?
No, it's making an impression on the rest of us so that we know we can do our jobs. The legislature, the Republican control of Congress, as well as the Republican control of many state houses, is gerrymandered in. They don't care about their voters. They really don't. They manage to draw lines so that they don't represent voters, but they represent interests. And the crash in the stock market is some of the interests they represent. So that I think is pushing them more than the crowd sizes. Interesting.
One of the articles that I saw, I think it was in the Wall Street Journal, they did a kind of a then and now about how corporate America, when Trump was first elected, corporate America was like, it's going to be great. And, Jamie Dimon was like, if tariffs, increase security, then get over yourselves. And now all of a sudden those same people are like, hey, dude, this is hurting us. This is definitely hurting us. Who's he going to listen to? He seems to be doubling down so far. But even according to the Wall Street Journal today, even Elon Musk is saying that it's going in a bad direction, for God's sake.
I'm not in Trump's head. I don't know who he listens to. I don't know if he listens to anybody. Putin, he listens to Putin. So I don't know what he's going to do. But the fact that all of America is hurting and all of America is frightened and all of America is angry, except for the happy talk on Fox and Friends in the morning, I listened to Ted Cruz panicking and saying this is going to hurt us in the midterms. And, to hear Republicans panic is the greatest silver lining to this crisis imaginable.
Yeah. Well, Edwin, thank you.
It's painful. It's painful for everybody, but the Republicans aren't free of this pain, and they're finger pointing and they're panicking, and they keep trying to blame poor Joe Biden.
Oh my God, I know.
Utter BS.
Yeah. Oh, they tried to blame him for Signalgate, too. Well, we got these phones in the Biden administration, and Signal was preloaded. Therefore, it's his fault we used it.
Yeah,
which I thought was probably the most twisted Biden blame yet.
Right. Well, if wherever you think the bottom is, they'll go below it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you for sharing your observations with us. It's always a pleasure to chat with you. We are going to take a break. I am going to be back with more news of the day, and then we are going to get to the phone lines and the text lines. Woo! We got a lot planned. Let's get to it.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
Edwin Eisendrath and Scott Duff were both at the Hands Off rally. Nationwide, it's estimated that 5.2 million people, 2% of the American population, 2+% of the American population came out to send a message, to share with one another our feelings. As Charlie Sykes says, you got to remember, we are not the crazy ones. We are not the crazy ones. Cory Booker, of course, got a lot of attention with his takeover of the U.S. Senate. He spoke, breaking the record, Strom Thurmond's record of 24 hours. He spoke not because he was trying to delay a vote on something. He spoke because he knew it would get attention. And as Edwin pointed out, the Democratic Party right now has no power. We don't have the House. We don't have the Senate. We don't have the White House. We have no power to get anything done. But that doesn't mean we can't do things. It doesn't mean we can't resist. Cory Booker talked recently about how, in his observation, The people of the United States are waking up, and they are definitely getting ready to do things. And on Sunday, he was on MSNBC with Jen Psaki, and he talked about this. So I want to share it with you now. Listen to this.
I get to serve in a body with a whole bunch of really incredible human beings who all have incredible lives. Literally, I get to sit in that back row, and in my back row is a literal astronaut, the guy that has been a fighter pilot and defied gravity, on the same row as somebody like Tammy Duckworth, who is literally has lost her legs in combat. These amazingly heroic, committed people who struggle with trying to find out what is the best way at this moment that America is calling on their leadership, what's the best way to serve. And all of us have tried things, stumbled, struggled, and tried to figure out how do we honor the traditions and really the decorum of the Senate, but yet at the same time show that we are fed up and want to fight. And so those discussions go on, and each individual senator has to make their decisions. But I'm proud of the 47 that I've been in, and I think all of us, including myself, know that what we've been doing is inadequate, and we need to do more. And I think what you're seeing right now, and what you're going to see over the coming weeks and months, you've talked about it a little bit, is a lot of people that are going to follow the leadership of our states, because we are seeing people who've worked 2 shifts and then are coming out to rallies. We have seen people who are carrying their children because there's no child care available for them. They're carrying their children with them to rallies to speak up. And so in many ways, the people are leading right now, and I know that a lot of us are committed to being with them in that fight, and I'm excited about this moment. I can feel folks waking up. I can feel the energy. I can feel the wave growing, and it's not a Democratic wave or a blue wave. It's a wave of saying this president is toxic, chaotic, demeaning and degrading, and is hurting American people, and we're not going to stand for it.
Amen to that, Mr. Booker, Senator Booker. Like I said, the markets are supposed to be closing soon. It has been, to put it mildly, a volatile day on Wall Street. I told you even Elon Musk is now criticizing the administration. He took a couple of swipes at Peter Navarro, who's Trump's mouthpiece on the whole tariff situation. And, of course, you know, a lot of the corporate CEOs who have been very quiet or moderately supportive of Trump now are starting to really come out and say they are really worried. Oh, by the way, Apple, you know, the whole point of this tariffs, according to Trump, was to get manufacturing back to the United States. We will make it so expensive for people to manufacture elsewhere that they will come back to this country. Apple does a lot of its production in China, which has now been hit with absolutely absurd tariffs. Oh, and Trump is threatening another 50% tariff on China. Apple announced that their iPhone production that they've been doing mostly in China, well, they're going to move it to India. Wait a minute. I thought everybody was supposed to come back to the United States. They're moving it to India in an effort to keep the price of iPhones from going through the roof. By the way, speaking of tariffs, the BBC published an article about the tariffs that Trump has imposed upon Heard and McDonald Islands. These are tiny, remote, Antarctic places where seals and penguins live. Australian Trade Minister Don Farrell, according to the BBC, told the Australian Broadcasting Company that the tariffs were clearly a mistake. Poor old penguins. I don't know what they did to Trump, but look, I think it's an indication, to be honest with you, that this was a rushed process. There's speculation that some Doge boys found just basically a list of countries that they, of course, didn't vet and submitted that for the tariff structure. Well, you know, the herd in McDonald Islands may not have any people, but they have tons and tons of penguins. And on social media, I saw a statement by the penguin prime minister, who represents all the penguins on herd in McDonald Islands, took to the podium to talk about the tariffs. Now, I'm going to play this, but remember, this is the leader of the penguins. This is the penguin prime minister from these two Antarctic islands. Listen what he had to say.
Thank you for joining. As you are aware, U.S. President Donald Trump has imposed a 10% tariff on all exported goods from our sovereign, windswept homeland, the Heard and McDonald Islands. Now, some have described our territory as uninhabited, others as barren or inhospitable. Even more have described it in detail by saying, there are no humans here. These people are correct, except we are here. We have always been here, watching, standing, sometimes waddling. True, we may not export goods in the traditional sense, unless you count style, contempt, and the occasional puffin who is really, really lost. Stupid puffins. But it's the principle. To target our proud penguin nation with tariffs is a declaration, not of war. We're not saying that because we're penguins and not big on fighting. Hard to punch someone with flippers. But we are saying we know where the fish are. And we control the supply. Kinda. Maybe. I don't know. We're penguins. We say a lot of If President Trump believes that Heard and McDonald Islands pose an economic threat to the United States, we humbly suggest that he look inward and possibly at a map that hasn't been sharpied yet. This is not the first time we have been underestimated. Actually, it may be. There's no way of knowing. Again, we're penguins. But let it be known, we are not simply just birds in little suits. We are birds in tuxedos. Speak off, Trump. Thank you. No questions.
You don't want to mess with those birds in tuxedos. And in case you were wondering, that little comedic clip, it's not surprisingly from a Canadian comedian. His name's Stuart Reynolds. He goes by the stage name Brittle Star. And he is from Ontario, Canada, another country that could post a similar clip. But today he was the Penguin premier. We are going to take a break. We're going to have texts and calls right after this.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
773-763-9278. I know I said I was opening the phone lines, and then I didn't give you the number. It was a test, and you passed. 773-763-9278. Barb from West Chicago texted in, I went to the protest in Geneva, Illinois. They estimated there were 6,000 people there. It was electric. The car honkers were amazing, too. There was a small handful of Proud Boys there. We ignored them. Good for you, Barb. Somebody texted in a sign that they saw at one of the marches. I've seen better cabinets at IKEA. And another picture from a South Side demonstration. Cousins Jean and Ginny protesting against this fascist administration. It was a great turnout. That was at 103rd and Western. A lot of you were there. And thank you. Some of you are sharing your signs, either signs you made or signs you saw. 6 bankruptcies, working on 7. That would be America. Pete Hegseth, where happy hour meets amateur hour. S&P 500, first 90 days. Already tired of all the winning. Thank you for that. We are going to continue to share your texts. But first, I want to get to the phone lines. Our good friend Bob is on the line from Indiana. Hey, Bobby.
Oh, it's just an old bird in his 1930 tuxedo here. Well, in good news, potentially from the area, some of my aggravations have been resolved. The one peculiar one that I've been telling you about, the nutball down the road from me, still has not put up any of his gun or Trump flags now in months.
Oh, wow.
So I find that interesting.
I find that interesting, too.
Two others that also I get a lot of enjoyment out of. The guy that had spent, I don't know how much time and money building this, I think he's the guy that had built the noose for the vice president. But he built a great big sign for Trump and had flags and everything on it. That has completely disappeared.
Really?
And I don't think it was the wind that got that.
Wow.
But the wind did get something, and to me it's hilarious. It's the flag that kept getting more and more tattered that the guy put out hanging over the one road, back road. Well, it went gone with the wind, but they found it, and instead of putting it back up on the stanchion on the tree, they just stuck it in the ground at the base of the tree. You can barely make out what the tatters that it even is a Trump, but it's this defiant piece of a wash rag just sitting there forlorn by the street. And I get the biggest laugh out of that. I think the numbers are probably low about Saturday, and I'll tell you why I think that. I didn't fully realize, but my sister told me that was supposed to be any place that had a courthouse, where it was potentially they would have one of these rallies.
Oh.
And apparently they have one here in downtown Michigan City at the Michigan City Courthouse. If I'd have known that, I was feeling horrible. I still would have drove by and gave them a few.
Give them a couple of honks.
And support.
Yeah.
And what I got to thinking is, well, wait a minute. That's Michigan City. We're not a big town. But there's also a county courthouse in LaPorte, Indiana. And then they have a courthouse in Valpo. I said, wait a minute. They don't talk. I heard almost nothing over the weekend on the news, and they only once or twice mentioned it, Washington, D.C., Chicago, Los Angeles,
Interesting. So they didn't do a lot of local coverage.
There was no mentioning that, yes, they were having rallies in towns all across. So I'll bet you that if you could get the full totals, it would be a lot different than what they want people to know.
Well, somebody texted in. I was talking to Edwin, and he couldn't really figure out how many people had been there. But somebody texted in that they were at Daley Plaza, and they estimate, based on, I don't know what, they're being, better at estimating crowds. They think that there were 20,000 people who showed up at Daley Plaza. Because, not only was the plaza filled, but the crowd went back for a block. So I think it's really interesting, your observations, that a lot of this wasn't reported. And I love the fact, Bobby, keep an eye on those signs, because I think that's a real indication. I think that it's hard to believe that they didn't see this coming, but I think that there's starting to be a lot of buyer's remorse for people who voted for Trump. I think, Charlie Sykes does a newsletter, and in today's newsletter, he quotes this guy who he describes as a right-wing influencer, Ray Hanania, And he apparently posted, for those asking, yes, voting for Trump was a mistake, he says now. I thought we'd get a repeat of the first administration, but we didn't. The signs were there. I just did not take my own ideas about the awfulness of Trump and MAGA seriously enough. Nobody, he wrote last week, knew how bad. And Charlie Sykes commented, nobody? Lord, give me strength. Nobody knew? Seriously, dude? We all knew. And we tried to tell you.
I had a clue in 2016.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. Joan, I don't know what their problem is. I know what mine are. I got plenty of them. But Trump was not one of them. I had him pretty much figured out. I'm surprised, but I did. Anyway, You have a good day.
Thanks, Bobby, and thank you so much for the call. I appreciate that. There are so many texts. The text line is blowing up today. Joan, I heard you mention Jamie Dimon complaining. Well, all that he and his buddies need is to tell Donnie they don't want the tax breaks. What an interesting idea, because, this is all of these DOGE cuts. That's not about government efficiency. It's about cutting enough money from the budget that he can declare his tax break extension to the tune of trillions of dollars, and then he can say, but it's not going to cost us anything because we've found the savings to pay for the tax cuts. But, the tax cuts, I'm sure, are wonderful, and the billionaires are looking forward to them. But a lot of these billionaires make their money from the stock of their company. And guess what tariffs hurt? I mean, Tesla used to be the number one source of Elon Musk's personal wealth was the value he owned in Tesla. It is no longer the case. Tesla has lost so much value that now his shares of Starlink, the space satellite company, are worth more than his shares in Tesla. And apparently he is not very happy about it. Mark Zuckerberg has been to the White House, they say, 3 times because the European Union being hit with these tariffs, they apparently have decided that the best way to strike back is not just randomly, but to boycott or tariff of their own tech companies. Hit the tech bros where they live. Tesla's already tanking in Europe. And apparently the European Union has got Mark Zuckerberg so frightened that he has been to the White House 3 times to try to ask Trump to ease up. That ain't happening yet. As a matter of fact, today Trump made a comment, and you probably don't know this, it was news to me, that the European Union was formed to hurt the United States. Did you know that? It had nothing to do with the fact that they share so many borders and they wanted to make travel and trade easier. No, the European Union came to be simply to hurt the United States. Man, oh man, what do these guys have in for Europe? J.D. Vance, remember that his portion of the Signal text chain? I'm so tired of bailing Europe out. Really, dude? Okay. All righty. We are going to take a break. We're going to be back with more calls and more texts right after this.
Now back to Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
People are texting in about the rallies they went to. Bob from Gurnee said that there were 3,000 demonstrators in Gurnee. Carl from Kankakee texted in that his cousin was at a very big rally in Louisville, Kentucky. Somebody who was at Daily Plaza said that they talked to a police captain, and the police captain told them they thought there were 20,000 people at Daly Center. So, yeah, you know what? And it ain't the last one. Organizers are already in the works planning the next big rally, and we will talk about that in the days to come. Let's go back to the phone lines. Richard is on the line from Chicago. Hey, Richard, thanks for the call.
Hi. No, thank you. Just before I start, when you're planning a space and it's for standing room only, it's 3 square feet per person. So you could take the area from there's layouts for all these places, and you could estimate that would be the tightest. So you could actually approximate these crowds by that. So but that ties into what I was just the reason I called. I am bewildered when people talk about bringing back manufacturing here so glibly, because as I recall, the 3 reasons that people have moved their places away. Number one is cost of goods, and labor is generally the biggest part, and things are changing, of course, with automation. So they moved there because that makes their products cheaper. So that was one. The other, they used to complain so heartily about the EPA, and businesses were always saying, we can't take these draconian measures and actually run a clean operation. So that's another problem with moving them back. And the next one is it takes about 1.5 to 2 years to build a plant, and it depends upon the complexity of it. But they just don't build them. They'll snap their fingers and there's something happening there. So as all of this talk, it goes on and on for months now about this genius's ideas, I'm still waiting for somebody, to actually flesh it out. There'll be a 2-year lag if we were to actually close plants. Well, the other thing that they were also doing, we're mad at the wrong people. Corporations moved there for those financial reasons, but also China was giving Intel big money to move their plants there and share their technology. I remember $1 billion when they were first moving their chip manufacturing to China. So those are all reasons. We're mad at the government, be mad at the corporations, and maybe economics, I guess.
Yeah.
So, it takes a year. I built buildings and for 40 years, and it takes a long time to build to get zoning, to get drawings done.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't. The Trump tariffs are so high that even if a company wanted to move their manufacturing, their sewing, their construction to the United States, you're absolutely right. That doesn't happen overnight. That is, you got to find a facility. Hopefully you don't have to build one. Maybe you can find something, and then you have to rehab it and make it suitable for your needs. You have to go through municipalities. You might have to make sure you got the zoning and all that. And then you have to build out whatever you need, and then you have to hire people. If you're lucky, if you're working at light speed, maybe 2-3 years, you could get this done. It's ridiculous.
Yes. Yeah, and as I said, this is what makes me so crazy with the news is that it seems like most of the reporting that we get out of the major companies, they're brain dead. I mean, can't they ask somebody to flesh this out, and they could actually make an article out of it instead of just repeating nonsense? I have to turn it off half the time because I can't. If you know anything about this stuff, you just can't stand it. You keep waiting for someone who. What was it? There was I can't even remember. Your brains are getting fried with all of this stuff happening.
Yeah.
But you're 100% right. I mean, it takes months to make a set of drawings. Mm-hmm. You have to have utilities. You have to deal with a phone company and the electrical. Maybe they don't even have enough power where you want to go. So, it is really a complex thing. And so someday I hope we have a press that is up to the task again, like we had at one point in time.
I hope we survive till then. And, in the midterms, if we can retake the House, I mean, ideally, there's a lot of Republican senators who are actually up for re-election in this midterm. They're unfortunately Republicans that come from pretty red states, though these days everybody seems to be hurting, and I'm not so sure that's the reassurance it once was about getting reelected. But if we could at least take over the House, we could put the brakes on some of this nonsense. At the very least.
Well, I mean, gerrymandering cost it. I mean, 2 cycles back, Ohio had drawn 5 illegal maps, and that's according to Ohio's Supreme Court. And yet, they waited till it was supposedly too soon to do a new map. So that's what gave the Republicans 4 years ago gave them the House, were those stolen seats. There were 3 for Republicans, 2 for Democrats. So, it would be really wonderful also, it's never going to happen, but I wish we would, when these elections do, like midterms come up, that it was really kind of balanced. It wasn't like overloaded against Democrats one time and then Republicans. In an ideal society, I think you would like to have elections that don't have that extra aspect to them, where it's just you elect people and one side isn't disadvantaged, But,
yep.
Who cares, right? That'll never happen.
Yeah. Well, we've got to survive. And, I understand how you feel about being overwhelmed. Trust me, I get that. And, I'm worried about that. I'm worried about that people will be burnt out. But
yes.
That's why I always tell people, you can't do everything, but you can do something. Figure out the cause that's near and dear to your heart and focus the bulk of your energy on that. Because we need people like you. Yeah.
Well, it's fight or flight at this point, those are the natural responses to things like this. And I just sort of realized at one point that, you can't do either. And so so people ought to think about fight or flight, I think, because that's what, my motto when I get really pissed. And, I go, well, wait a minute, slow it down, this too will pass. Trump is not going to last 4 years. He's going to keel over. And, of course, we have, and maybe without him, I think he isn't really essential anymore. The Republican Party has gotten so weird that they can put up anybody. Their venom, is just coursing through their whole party. And so I think he'll be replaced with some Indian bands, I know, but it'll be somebody else. So, but, at least it won't be him. He's pretty dumb.
Well, thank you for the call. I appreciate it very, very much. I also want to, I got a really nice text. Remember, we got a text. There's been a text conversation with this guy from the suburbs who was having a family from Venezuela live with him. I don't know if you remember that because, he was concerned about offering them, trying to provide some kind of sanctuary from them. He sent us an update today. Hello, not sure if you remember, I had a family from Venezuela staying with me, aunt, uncle, lived with me, the mother and father, and 2 kids in that same family lived at a church shelter. Well, good news. They were able to save enough money to get their own apartment. They were able to save over the 9 months they lived with me, and they now say, God, I hope this is right. They now say they have faith in the United States that they won't be deported. I'm nervous for them, but they trust that things will get better. This is Joe from Edgewater. Sorry, I think I got your town wrong. God, Joe, I love that kind of faith in this country because a lot of us are struggling with that now. You know what? And so many people are sending me pictures from the protests that they were at, and I am just so proud of all of you. So proud of all of you. Maybe people who listen to the conversations on this radio station are more politically inclined than the average Joe, but we were able to get out. This wasn't just talking on the radio. This was getting out and doing something. And I just couldn't be happier. And people are texting in some of these towns I've never heard of that had their own protests, tiny towns. And it is just so, so wonderful. People are, somebody sent me a picture of a car that drove past the Arlington Heights rally, were beeping their horn and had a little doggy with his head hanging out the window. This is community, folks. This is what it feels like to come together. And I also got some texts. There were, as you might imagine, protests at Tesla dealers. Whew, so glad I got rid of that car when I did. Whew, whew. And one of our callers, Tom from Darien, was at a Tesla dealership on Saturday. Hey, Tom, how are you?
Hi.
Where were you on Saturday?
You know
what did you see?
Okay, so I got there early. I got there before the 12 o'clock because I knew there was going to be difficulty finding a parking spot. I did find a parking spot. But my God, that was the most heart-rendering thing I've ever done.
Wow. Tell me about it.
It made you realize how important it is that we're all there. Now, there's a lot of older people there, and I get it. I get it because it's us who are being threatened more so than the younger ones. I get that. But I want to make a side comment. You were talking about something happening to Trump. If Trump dies, MAGA will die with it because he's the only thing that holds it together.
You know, I worry about that. I've got to tell you, Tom, I worry about that because, I was talking to, oh my God, the Tea Party guy, Joe Walsh, and we've had conversations about this for a long time. And he told me that he now believes that the party, what used to be the Republican Party, has so embraced the MAGA hate and the MAGA anger that he is very concerned that it will actually outlive Donald Trump. I guess it'll depend. If something happened to Trump, we'd get J.D. Vance. And I think J.D. Vance is smarter than Donald Trump, but I'm not sure he's any kinder.
Well, the problem there is when Trump's gone, that is the head of the snake. And the power that comes behind him dies with him. Because
God, I hope you're right.
He's the one who threatens. And if he can't threaten anymore, what are they going to do? They're all going to go their own way.
Yeah. Yep. Well, we'll see. We shall see.
Great talking to Joan.
Thank you, Tom. I really appreciate your call. And there were a number of people who were at the Northbrook Tesla takedown last week. And the one Tom was at was in Lisle. And apparently, according to my text line, it was extremely well attended. Good. As Cory Booker said, we're waking up. Yes, we are. And we're waking up, and by God, we're going to do something about it. We are going to take a break, and when we come back, I'm hoping to have a conversation with a former lieutenant governor of Illinois, Bob Kustra. And I'll explain to you when we come back how I got connected with him. And he's had a very interesting career since he left the Chicago area. We'll talk about that and more right after the news.
Don't turn that dial.
A dangerous mistake to make.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive. Returns right now on WCPT 820.
If you're a regular listener for our program, you know that from time to time, I like to talk to my good friend David Lehman, who's a longtime newsman, has worked in management and reporting and anchoring all over the country. Well, out of the blue, he sent me a note, and he said, you know who you should have on? You should have Bob Kustra on. The former lieutenant governor under Jim Edgar. and then went into the academic arena. He said, I just had a conversation with him, and he's great. He's wonderful. He has a lot to say. So, of course, I then reached out to Mr. Kustra, and he joins us now. Bob, thank you so much for being here.
Well, it's great to be with you, Joan. This is quite a treat to be back on Chicago radio.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people don't know that you almost went to work for Channel 7. Talk about that.
Yes, I did. It was actually ABC owned at the time WLS, and I was going to be the afternoon talk show host in 1994. We announced it in a press conference in downtown Chicago, and that night we celebrated. And that night I got a call from Mrs. Edgar, who was distraught over the fact that her husband was undergoing quadruple bypass surgery. And I remember turning to my wife and saying, this is really a case of very bad timing. And sure enough, the governor asked me to return to duty. I did. He and I are good friends, and I wasn't leaving because of any disenchantment with him. It was just a new opportunity. But I told him he had to call ABC Disney to tell them the news, and they might not like it since I had a signed contract at the moment. Ooh. So he put a call in to this guy down in Atlanta, and the guy said, well, I guess I don't have any choice. He was obviously disgruntled, and then hung up. And in the next few minutes, the governor's mansion got a call. And the call was from this guy at ABC who said, is there any chance that your governor could have called me to get Kustra out of the contract? And they said, yeah, he just made that call. But obviously they thought it might have been a crank call or something.
Oh, my God.
And,
they didn't. Yeah. That's so interesting. And weird. But, that's the business. Interesting and weird simultaneously.
That's right.
My God, we could have had the Bob Kustra Show. It could have had theme music. You could have had celebrity guests. It could have been great. But I think things turned out for you. Go ahead.
Better. I mean, the fact is that my wife was on board the move, but not long after I signed the contract and before Jim Edgar asked me to come back on duty, she said, have you noticed that on AM radio, there's this guy named Rush Limbaugh, and are you expected to do what he does because you won't do it? Mm-hmm. And I said, well, yeah, you're right about that. I guess I won't. So as it turns out, the direction that so much of AM radio in those days was going, I was not the guy for the job, as it turns out. And so I never had any regrets whatsoever. As a matter of fact, I still do a radio show that is in Boise, Idaho, because that's where the university was where I work. And it's called Reader's Corner, and I interview authors, and I do it every week. And it still gives me the same opportunity to connect with listeners that I had back in those days.
Ooh, what book? Well, before we move on to back to you and your job history, what book would you recommend for me and my listeners based on your interviews?
Well, I just finished one that is really a cool book. It's called The Doorman. It's a novel. It's written by Chris Pavone. And if you remember back in the 80s, there was a book called The Bonfire of the Vanities.
Yeah.
And then it became a movie. Tom Hanks starred in it. And it was Tom Wolfe was the author. And it was a major critique of the way the world worked in the 1980s, especially the financial world. Well, this is, I would argue, kind of an updated version of that. I don't think the author intended it to be, but it's a great. It's the story of a doorman in a very expensive condo on the upper side of New York, and I would recommend that. Clearly, I think it's one of the better books I've read this year. It's an interesting novel, but there's a guy in France a long time ago, Albert Camus, who who said fiction is the lie through which we tell the truth. And this book is fiction through which the author tells the truth in his social commentary about so much of what goes on in our lives. Anyway.
I'm definitely gonna pick that one up. You know, you mentioned Rush Limbaugh, and you know, Rush Limbaugh famously said that once the fairness doctrine was done away with, it really freed him to say whatever he wanted to without having to worry about equal time. And it kind of was the beginning of what I refer to as angry rage radio, almost kind of spawned the whole idea of the angry MAGAs. I know that when Paul Simon left the Senate, you were a Republican, but you ran in the Republican primary to be in that race to replace Paul Simon, and you were defeated in what was considered a real upset. You were defeated by Al Salvi, and I kind of got the feeling that it was like, were you too moderate? Were you too middle of the road? Were you too ready to work across the aisle? Was that kind of a one of those early races that saw a very conservative person defeating a more moderate person?
No, you summed it up very well, Joan. That's exactly what it was. Eddie Vdolyak at the time, by the way, was on the radio, and he was doing numbers on me every day of the week. And it centered around a lot of issues. I know the issue that I got charged out of was they had this TV commercial where this bartender is wiping down his bar, talking to his patrons, and he said, "You hear about this Kustra guy? He voted for every tax increase down there in Springfield." And, of course, when we went back to see what he was talking about, they weren't really even – many of them were not even tax increases. They were giving local taxpayers the ability to increase a tax if their school district needed a new building or something. Those are the kinds of bond issue elections that we have all the time in the state of Illinois. Anyway, the bottom line is I like to tell my friends over the years that I was defeated by the Tea Party before the Tea Party was even invented.
Yeah.
But basically, that's it.
Yeah.
And again, everything works out. You know, it's a great lesson that I tried when I was addressing students over the years. I've always said, you know, you never know how things are going to turn out. You might have something come up on your plate that doesn't work out for you, but maybe there's a reason for that. And for me, 15 years as the president of Boise State University, it was just, 3 Fiesta Bowl wins. Speaking of football, it was just an opportunity that I never would have had I stayed in Illinois. And I don't think I would have lasted very long in the U.S. Senate anyway, because if Salvi didn't beat me in that year, they would have beat me the next time, given my more moderate positions on the issues.
Well, we need to take a break, Bob, but when we come back, I want to talk about how you segued from political life to academia. I know you were at Eastern Kentucky University as president there before you became president of Boise State University. You know, you may have noticed, Bob, that a lot of academic institutions are coming under some real fire right now, both by what their policies are and also what federal funds they might be losing. I want to talk to you about that situation. I'm talking to former Illinois Lieutenant Governor Bob Kustra. We'll be back right after this.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
I'm chatting with former Illinois Lieutenant Governor Bob Kustra. He left political life, became the president of Eastern Kentucky University, and then moved on to be president of Boise State University, where he still lives in that area, still works doing a radio show in Boise. And what do you think, Bob, when you see right now, I mean, college presidents, university presidents being, accused of anti-Semitism or whatever, and federal funds being pulled in what appears to be a war on our academic institutions? Has any of that affected what's going on in Boise, and what do you think of it overall?
Well, first of all, my initial thought is I'm sure glad I left the university presidency in 2018
Yeah.
because I really did miss most of what's going on right now. And you really have to distinguish between public and private universities in one respect, because in addition to the free speech issue, which I think you were alluding to, where Columbia University, of course, is in the news all the time. In addition to that, state legislatures in many states, including Idaho, have grown much more conservative. When I got there in 2003, the Republicans were overwhelmingly in control, but they were reasonable people. We could deal with them. They respected higher education, and we would be able to walk out of there with the funding we needed to support our students. Not the case anymore. These legislatures have grown very hostile. They don't like higher education. In some cases, they just assume privatize all of public universities in America, which would be a significant challenge for so many students who rely on the public aspect of a public university. So that's probably, for me, the greatest change in what's going on right now in public universities. In the private universities, of course, there's still a lot of issues surrounding free speech. But, when you lose funding the way you can lose it from a legislature that no longer expects to support your university, those are sad days for students who can't afford to go.
Bob, what changed in state legislatures? How did they become so hostile?
Well, I don't think there's any question that, I left in 2018 and it wasn't bad, but 2016 was Donald Trump's first election, and as MAGA took off, MAGA just completely infiltrated state legislatures. Ours, certainly in Idaho, is nothing more than a MAGA legislature these days. There's a few reasonable people, but even the reasonable people get primaried. And so what's happened nationwide is that the reasonable folks on the Republican side, let's say the moderates, we'll call them that, they get challenged. And big money comes in, dark money that you can't trace. And in so many cases, we have many really solid citizens who served in the legislature with Republican label behind their name, and they're now sitting home thanks to the dark money that challenged them. And in the meantime, you get these crackpots who really, really do not know what they're doing, number one, and number two, if they do know what they're doing, it's to destroy government and especially universities.
Speaking of money, what do you think about our current unelected president, Elon Musk?
Yeah, it's just so frustrating. It makes no sense whatsoever how a president could rely on someone who comes from South Africa, who himself is a migrant, and here they are raising Cain over the migrants. I mean, it's most unfortunate. I'm watching the news carefully, and I'm sure your listeners have seen some evidence that maybe Trump is going to push him back a little bit, get him out of the spotlight. It's been a disaster so far, but I'm hoping the day will come when it gets so bad that Trump just sends him home, or at least finds a place for him where he can't do the damage he is in the process of doing right now.
Well, a few days ago, Politico reported that Trump was telling his staff, Elon's done such a great job. Really appreciate him. Wish he could stay forever. But, he's got to get back to his businesses. He really misses being at his businesses. And Politico reported that. And then the White House came out the next day and said it was all lies. None of it was true. Yeah. Absolutely none of it was true. They love Elon. He can stay forever. Where do you think the truth lies, if it's even possible to figure that out?
I think it's probably, I would assume it's Trump trying to cover up a bit. I would think that we have here a president who has come to realize that this guy's taking it a little too far. And the most important thing is the visuals. president of the United States. I mean,
yes.
those optics just don't work, and there have to be people surrounding Trump that remind him of that, if in fact he doesn't know it himself. And that's where I think, he probably says a few things behind closed doors to get out, but once it's out, then he's got to figure out a way to cover his tracks. But I'm still on the side of those who think that this day is going to come when Elon is going to be back building spacecrafts.
Do you think everybody was waiting to see what Elon's money would do in the Wisconsin Supreme Court race? He not only donated $20 million personally and through PACs, he actually showed up in Wisconsin. He was on stage. He was wearing a cheesehead hat. And then Susan Crawford won by 10 points. And in Wisconsin, man, you win by 2 percentage points and everybody's going, oh, my God, it's a landslide. And she won by 10 points. She creamed Brad Schimmel. Do you think that was something that Washington was kind of waiting to see how that would go, to see whether or not they could basically tell Elon to leave them alone, to go pound sand and not worry about it?
I bet there's a number of people, to your point, that are in Washington, some of them right in the cabinet members, who were hoping that Wisconsin would send a message to get Elon out of the White House, or at least out of the Oval Office. And that's exactly, of course, what happened. I mean, number one, Crawford was a very good candidate. I saw only her victory speech. And based on her victory speech, I say, can we just run her for another Senate seat? Now, I know they need her vote in the Wisconsin Supreme Court, but she is very good. And in addition to being very good, they ran a great campaign against Elon. And that, I think, that's probably the best news that all of us who wonder where all this is going, that's the best news we've had since Trump took office, that this woman was able to run on that issue of Musk and win and send a signal out there to Trump that this isn't working. And let's just hope that it is the beginning of what will happen on midterm day, when we might see even a lot more of this.
Yeah. Well, speaking of Senate, a lot of people think that Dick Durbin is going to be announcing pretty shortly that he is not going to run again. I don't know how closely you follow Illinois politics now that you've deserted us for Boise, but who would you think would be in the running for Dick Durbin's seat?
I don't follow politics that well to know the answer to that. As far as Dick is concerned, Dick and I both worked on opposite sides of the aisle in Springfield at the same time before he became a congressman and before I ended up getting into the legislature. And he would have been the guy I was running against in that election that I lost in 1996. So I've had great respect for Dick from the moment that he beat Salvi in the general, and then over the years, his rise into leadership. But as to who, I'm sure it's going to be a long line for one thing. I mean, Illinois is just a very competitive state, and also it's going to be a Democratic primary long line because, of course, I can't imagine, assuming they get a good candidate, how a Republican wins that seat. But there will be a long line of folks at the doorstep, no doubt about that.
Well, while we're on the subject of Illinois politics, do you think J.B. Pritzker is going to run for president?
Well, I certainly wouldn't object to it. I've been so impressed with the governor and his willingness to stand up for what's right and not being cowed as some of these folks have been. And I wouldn't at all put it past him. I think he'd be a great candidate. And why not? I mean, we need somebody who is willing to stand up and speak forthrightly and candidly about the state of our nation. And he has just done that brilliantly, I think, over these last few years, and let's hope that he considers it. Obviously, there's going to be a long list there as well, but he's proven his mettle, and I think that's good for the country and good for Illinois.
Okay, there's a lot of talk. I'm dragging you back into Illinois politics in case you haven't figured this out. There's a lot of talk that if J.B. Pritzker decides to run for president and not run for re-election as governor, that Rahm Emanuel will jump into that governor's race. I know that there are a lot of people who like Rahm, and there's a lot of people who feel that we need tough people who are willing to speak their mind in politics. But Rahm also has a certain amount of baggage from his time as mayor of Chicago. You know, the fact that he sat on the Laquan McDonald tape for over a year. I think things like that are going to resurface if he does run for governor. What do you think about that? What do you think of his chances if he does?
I think his chances will be pretty good. I did not know Rahm Emanuel personally when I was in office, but I've watched him over the years. Of course, he just returned from Japan, where he was our ambassador, and in fact, I just heard him not too long ago on a rather lengthy interview that keyed off of his time in Japan, but also addressed the issues that are confronting our nation now. And it was a very impressive understanding of what's going on and how to deal with it. This man is a very bright guy, and yeah, he does have. I know that side you're talking about. There are people who just can't seem to handle his abrupt approach to life. But I don't know. I think he could get out there and be a very serious candidate, and I think he'd be good for Illinois.
How can we listen to the radio show you do where you interview authors? Is it on the internet?
It's a podcast.
Oh.
So you can get there through Apple. It's called Reader's Corner.
Reader's Corner.
Reader's Corner. When you Google Reader's Corner, the only other Reader's Corner that pops up is a bookstore in Raleigh, North Carolina, I believe. But the other one, you can see it's Boise State Public Radio, and as a 30-minute interview, authors like it because they get a longer opportunity to talk about their books than just 3 minutes, which is usually the course. But anyway, it's easy to do. You can, Spotify, you can do it on. You can do it on Apple.
Cool.
There's a number of ways to get to it. So thank you for asking. I appreciate it.
Well, you're very welcome. I love books. I love reading books. I love reading reviews of books, and I look forward to listening to your podcast. Bob, this has been delightful. I hope sometime in the future you will come back.
Oh, I'd love to, Joan. It's been nice talking with you.
Thanks. Bob Kustra, former lieutenant governor of Illinois, now doing a radio show in Boise called Reader's Corner. Look for it wherever you get your podcasts. We're going to take a break and be back with more after this.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
I am joined now by David Schultz, Distinguished University Professor of Political Science at Hamline University. It has been a while. David, how have you been?
I am doing well, and I hope you're doing well despite everything.
Well, I'm pacing myself. I got yelled at by my doctor recently, who said that I wasn't doing enough self-care, David. So I am making a concerted effort to work more fun into my life. My doctor said, especially with what you do for a living, you need more self-care. So there you have it. I'm the self-care queen these days. Oh, my God, David, with so many things going on in the world, I don't know where sometimes to even begin these days. Let's do an overview. In the 4,000 years since Trump returned to the White House, at least that's what it feels like, is 4,000 years. I don't think it was quite that long. It just feels like it was that long. What do you see? How do you evaluate it? What were the things that stood out to you?
A few different things. Okay, and let's compare Trump's first term in office. We'll call that Trump 1.0 to now his second time, 2.0. The one thing that stood out in Trump 1.0 was two impulses, at least, or maybe three. First, it was just the overwhelming incompetence of his first term, and that incompetence basically made it impossible after a while for him to get anything done, because he just didn't understand how to move the levers of government, how to work with others, to cooperate. And after like first few months, or first year, it pretty much, his administration broke down, and it was just very destructive. All right. I say that because I'm seeing the exact same impulse this time, where there's both he wants to break absolutely everything out there, whether it's by willful choice or just by incompetence. And at the same time, I think he wants to try to do something, but it's hard to figure out what it is. And so I see an incredible continuity in terms of that. But what I really do see is just this incredible destructiveness, where there isn't any kind of coherent overall, let's say, pattern, to what he wants to accomplish. It's all about what? It's all about him. It's all about his own personal, petty grievances, revenges, et cetera, And what's happening is that he's got a bunch of enablers in his office or in Congress and his administration that are just enabling his worst behavior. Unlike, again, the first term, where you at least had some people who were out there who were checking him. I mean, you had people who were trying to restrain him. Right now, there seems to be nobody restraining his worst impulses. And I don't know about you. Somewhere along the line, I'm a political scientist. I teach American government. I kind of learned these things called like separation of powers, checks and balances. I can't remember what grade I learned it. But I feel like none of that's there right now. And so that's sort of how I would describe it right now, is that just this incredible like pettiness, destruction, and really no significant institutional checks on this really bad behavior.
Do you think that's what he learned in his first administration? Because remember, he was bringing in the generals, because he thought they were strong, and then he decided he was smarter than all of them. I think that what he took away from his first time in office was, don't have anybody around you who is going to say no to you, or to tell you to slow walk something, or to tell you something's a bad idea. Only have the people around you who are loyal to you. I mean, he as much as said that loyalty was going to be key. And that's what we're seeing in what is arguably the single most incompetent presidential cabinet that I have seen in my lifetime. The only thing they have in common is that it's Trump says jump, we say how high.
Yeah. I was going to say it's a combination of all the yes people, yes people who are not going to do what their job is supposed to be. Because if you're really doing your job, what you have to do is sometimes tell, and whether this is the public sector, private sector, whatever, sometimes your boss to do the good job, here's the bad news. Here's what you need to know. So none of them are going to give them the bad news. They're all yes people. But the other thing I learned a long time ago is that what you want to do also, I always say to people, I want to hire people smarter than me, and I want people smarter than me so they can do a really good job, and they also make me look really good too. And so I feel like it's a combination of him neither hiring smart people nor people who are going to tell him what he needs to know, because you're right, it's loyalty. But the part that perplexes me about this is that he demands 100% loyalty, or from everybody. But tell me, unless you have a different perception here, I don't think he has an ounce of loyalty to anybody else.
Oh God, no. He doesn't have any. That's what I've been saying for so long now, especially before he was even reelected, when he was just on trial. It was like, how does he get lawyers to represent him? He doesn't want to pay them. He slow walks any payment. And frequently, people who try to help him out end up either going bankrupt, losing their law license, or going to jail. I mean, how is it that they say, oh, well, it's going to be different for me. David, it's going to be different for me. He really likes me. I'm smarter. I'm not going to let that happen. It's going to be great. And, I used to think that to be a lawyer, you had to be pretty smart, but it seems like they are so capable of deluding themselves. Somehow, yes, all these other people have been ruined, but I'm going to be the one who succeeds? Really?
Yeah. Speaking for lawyers, it's the arrogance of the profession, thinking smarter and thinking that I will not be the one who's duped. And, arrogance is always the first step towards ruination, I guess, or something like that. But, this is the part that's been perplexing me for the entire time, whether it goes back to even what The Apprentice, when he was on television, in terms of, we should have known from 17 years of that show that, he'll cut you, with a second's notice, at this point, or not even a notice here. And now think about like the tariffs and everything going on right now, is that the people who voted for him, the working class, the farmers, just about everybody, he's just undercutting them, but yet they still seem to be supporting him no matter what. Even though the price of eggs is still high, the price of cars is going to get higher, et cetera, like that, they're with him. And this, to me, it's all I can say is that it's not polarization. It's a cult of personality that he's been able to achieve for voters, but also these people really close to him. And that's the part that it's like, but he's not doing anything to help you folks. He's hurting you. Why are you still loyal to him?
Exactly. It's just insanity. And now it seems like we are starting to see real buyer's remorse of people who voted for him. Well, I didn't think he was going to come after me. And, I work for the Park Service and I don't have a job anymore, but I voted for him because I thought he was going to give me free in vitro fertilization. The man had over 30,000 documented lies during his first administration. Back then, when the Washington Post was actually a newspaper, they counted them. They reported them. So why was it that people believed, there's going to be free IVF? I'm not going to go after Social Security or any of those programs. Why did people, is it just a self-delusion, not just with lawyers, but with voters? The first time around, you could say maybe people were fooled. But the first time around, we saw who he was. And all these people, some of them well-educated, some of them not. But I'm seeing so many things about, I didn't think we were going to get this. Did you not know about Project 2025? At first Trump was like, I'm so grateful they put this project together. Then it was like, I don't think I've read it. And then they got to, I don't know anything about it. I'm pretty sure I've never heard of it. Come on.
Yeah. I can't remember what movie it was I saw. There was a great line in a movie once that said something like, was that people see what they want to believe. And I can't remember what movie. It was a great line, and that we have this infinite capacity to delude ourselves into believing anything. Or one of my former students once said, the perfect proof of self-delusion is looking in the mirror and convincing yourself you don't need to lose 10 pounds, and it was a great line she had once. But the point being is that for a lot of people, what Trump was really successful at is getting people to buy into something, getting him to buy into something. And so even despite the fact that they saw what he did in his first term, et cetera, they're willing to say, things were horrible under Biden. The economy was terrible. All these things were horrible. And it'll be so much better under Trump. Yeah, I'll vote for him or something like that. It's like, don't you remember what happened?
That's what I don't get.
Yeah,
I
and
really...
the thing is, one of the lines I remember, and maybe you can correct me on it. Maybe you heard it too here. At one point during the pandemic, we were a few months into the pandemic, and he said something to the effect of, "Well, if only 500,000 people die in the pandemic, that'll be a success for me, right?" And I'm thinking to myself, no, I mean, nobody dying is a success, but the fact that he said something like that, I mean,
well, just like how in the last week or so, he said, "I don't care if cars are more expensive. I don't care."
Yeah.
I don't care.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, he doesn't care if it's more expensive. I mean, what happened to the fact that, egg prices were supposed to come down, when he got elected? As far as I know, this past weekend when I went grocery shopping, I haven't seen the price of a dozen eggs drop. So he convinced people to believe. To see what they want to believe. That's, I guess, I'm phrasing it. To see what they want to believe. And even right now, I mean, I'm looking at polling data right now, and you're still seeing among his supporters, half of them at least still saying, "Oh yeah, I think he's doing a good job. I think the tariffs are fine. I think it's a good idea. We can wait it out." It's like, how long are you willing to wait this out? I mean, what was it, as of last Friday? What was it? $6 trillion in wealth was already wiped out.
Oh, I think it's up to 11.
And we're gonna. I mean, at some point, the inflation is just going to go off the Geiger counter. At this point, I mean, I'm old enough to remember the late '70s, early '80s when we had double-digit inflation going on, and you start to raise tariffs 10, 15, 20%. That's going to mean what? You're going to see prices going up 10, 15, 20%, and it's not just going to be on the overpriced, electronic items. It's going to be on the real, what I call the core stuff. Milk, bread, eggs, kids' shoes.
Yeah, and what does it say about me, David? I mean, he put tariffs on China. They're retaliating. Now he's saying that if they don't, within a few hours, get rid of their tariffs, he's going to add another 50% tariff. What does it say about me, David, that I'm rooting for China? I'm thinking to myself, hold the line, China. Come on.
Yeah.
What the heck?
I know. I mean, the other thing we should keep in mind here is that prior to Trump taking office, if we were to look at the long game, let's say for the last 20 to 25 years, tariffs across the world were at just about the lowest level they had been probably, again, at least in 30 or 40, 50 years. I mean, we were seeing very little tariffs across the world. And yes, global trade, there are inequities in it. There's no question about it. But on the other hand, I mean, part of why the United States and a lot of consumers have been able to, purchase a lot of the stuff that we have in our life is because the price of tariffs came down dramatically. And if you think about it, because he's saying, well, this is going to bring manufacturing back to the United States. First, if it's going to happen, it's not going to be right away. And second, do you really think if these jobs come back, if manufacturing comes back, they're going to come with jobs? They're not coming back with jobs. They're coming back with robots. They're coming back with automation. They're coming back with AI. Partly why they left the United States is because of the technology issues. The vast majority of them were not jobs that went overseas per se. They were jobs that just disappeared because of technology.
And on the cover of the Wall Street Journal this morning, Apple does a lot of their production in China, and they have announced they're going to move it, but not to the United States. They're going to India now. And isn't that a benefit? David and I have to take a break. I'm talking to David Schultz, political science professor at Hamline University. Earlier, he suggested that there was a song that perfectly captured this moment in Trumpland. So as we go to break, enjoy Florence and the Machine doing Ship to Wreck.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
I am joined by David Schultz, who is a political science professor at Hamline University. We touched a little bit on this whole situation with tariffs. And David Frum, who writes for The Atlantic magazine, this is a quote that I just loved. Here's from David Frum. You want to believe that there must be intelligent and honest people somewhere inside the Trump economic policy trying to limit the damage. But as with the existence of leprechauns, there is no empirical basis for this belief.
Great lie. It really is. I mean, and this is the purge. This is the purge that he's been doing, is that part of what you want with the civil service, what you want with the career bureaucracy is they're supposed to be apolitical. They're supposed to withstand. They're supposed to be kind of like the anchor there, the anchor that provides the apolitical expertise. And you're also hoping that some of what's called the senior executive service, people have kind of risen up. They become, again, part of the information people. They become the people, who provide, information to help inform what's going on, much in the same way that you're hoping that the careerists in the FBI, in the CIA, National Security Agency are becoming, help inform the choices higher up. And what he's done in leveraging his war against, the bureaucracy or the deep state or whatever like that, he's basically undercutting not just dissent, within his administration, but I'm going to argue he's basically significantly undermining American financial and basically overall national security.
I agree with you on that. What is your take on this idea that Canada should be the 51st state? And, oh, by the way, we might also invade Greenland. At first I thought, well, he's just trying to distract us from, some other negative news. But, there are a lot of people who are really frightened that there may actually be some sort of military action in our future.
Yeah, I think. I mean, if you were to tell me that I'll put the best face on it, and then tell you why it's not the best face. Okay, if you were to tell me that, if you were to tell me and say what Trump is concerned about is that as the Arctic defrosts, that we need to have a better strategic position in the Arctic, to guard ourselves against adversaries, to also go after, the rare earth metals and stuff like that. I would say, okay, that's a legitimate concern, but then I would say, the way that we can handle that is the fact that we've got what I thought was our closest ally in the world on our northern border that we can cooperate with. And as far as I know, Greenland, which is owned by Denmark, last I knew, we're not at war with Denmark. So I would say we've got some really good allies, who can help us, and we can negotiate things like maybe mining rights. We can strengthen security issues, et cetera, et cetera. So what I'm getting at here is that if he's concerned about the security or that's when we can negotiate stuff with our allies. But that's not what it seems to me what he's doing is bullying the people that he thinks he can bully. Push allies that we've got the closest relationship with, because what? He can't bully China. He can't bully North Korea. He can't bully Russia. I mean, the countries that, if you were to tell me, should he take a more aggressive stance against those countries? Maybe yes. But he's not. I mean, because even China, China is going to be able to better withstand the tariffs and the embargoes than we are. They've got 1.4 million people there. They could basically sell domestically or sell to Europe, sell elsewhere, and they don't really need the United States. Yeah,
Macron is talking about a European boycott. There's already. I saw a social media post from a guy from Canada who was walking through one of the major, Jewel, Mariano's type grocery stores, and walking through aisle after aisle. And the guy was saying, all the stuff from the United States is gone. Because there's the biggest grocery chain in Canada has decided to put a red maple leaf on everything that is produced in Canada. And the guy's just walking around the frozen case. He's walking on the aisles, and all of the little price things, they all have red maple leaves on them. And I don't understand. I don't know if you heard one of the government officials from Canada suggested that maybe Washington State, Oregon, and California would like to join Canada. She said, we'll make you one big province. We'll call it like Acadia. And and you can join us. And oh, by the way, free health care. And I said to a couple of people since then, if those 3 states do that, I'm moving out west. I saw Rufus Wainwright at the Old Town School of Folk Music a few days ago. And, he has dual citizenship, U.S. and Canadian. And he talked to the crowd at one point, and he said, if the United States invades Canada, will you guys go up to Canada and fight on that side? And the crowd went nuts. And he said he's been asking that question everywhere he goes on this tour. And the only place that didn't give him a resounding ovation was, he said, when he was in Tennessee. And he said to the crowd, he says, I'm guessing maybe half of you would go to Canada to fight. And he said, I got very polite applause. But this is so unpopular. Everything this president is doing is so unpopular.
And that's the issue to think about here, is that if you, again, parsing beyond some of the polling data, about some of the tariff stuff like that, but still when you look at it, when I said to you, even half of his supporters are against this. I mean, across the board, the tariffs, his position on Russia, his position on so many things, he does not have the public support whatsoever. And there's a couple of things I think we have to think about here. One is the fact that Congress isn't doing its job. And then the second thing is, if I'm going to put together my list among the worst Supreme Court decisions ever issued, it's going to be Trump versus the United States last year, when the court said, Trump can't be prosecuted, of things he did while he was president. Because think about it. Normally your check on the president, his first check, I call it, is the political solution. That is, we don't vote for him again. Well, we can't vote for him again anyhow, because it's second term. Second is you rely upon Congress. Congress isn't doing its job. Third, impeachment. Well, impeachment doesn't seem to be working. And fourth is what? Ultimately, criminal prosecution. So what's really happened at this point is that the 4 major checks upon presidential power largely don't exist. And so he's the proverbial bull in the china shop at this point, just doing whatever he wants. And he also, if I say the fifth now being the checks that come from within your own administration, he's undermining those. And so we lack the core checks that are out there to restrain his worst behavior.
If something happens to him, will J.D. Vance be better or worse?
Boy, that is a darn good question here. Do I think he is a smarter person? Yes. But I don't get the sense, tell me what you think. I also think, just like Trump, I don't think he has a moral fiber in his body, in the sense of, I think he's willing to go wherever he has to go, just to get reelected, just to stay in power, or do whatever he wants, and that's maybe what is the real big casualty right now, is trying to find somewhere in Congress, somewhere within the Trump administration, people who have some moral fiber to say, no, this is not the right thing to do. And think about what we're seeing stories around the country right now with members from the Republican Party in Congress. If they go back to their home districts now, you don't even want to face the voters. It's like, okay, if you're going to stand with the president, at least have the courage of your convictions. At least say, okay, I'm going to take it from my constituents. And they're not. They're not even doing that now. We have a state representative or a member of Congress in our state who basically to show up for like her town hall meetings, charged $10 for it, and then restricted who got to come in and wouldn't answer questions regarding things like Social Security, et cetera, et cetera. It's like, it's just not wanting to be accountable.
Yeah, really. David Schultz, the time always flies when you are here. Yeah. Thank you so much for spending some time with me and my listeners. I always talk about David being a political science professor. He's also the author of more than 45 books. So just, go to your library website and Google his name and pick something out. David, thank you so much.
My pleasure. Talk to you soon.
Talk to you soon. We're going to take a break for news. We'll be back with more after this.
Now back to Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
And I'm welcoming back John Shaw, director of the Paul Simon Public Policy Institute at Southern Illinois University, Carbondale. How are you, my friend?
Well, the sun is shining, Joan. We've had a weekend of unrelenting rain, and it's lifted, and it's cool and sunny, and hopefully that will be a metaphor for our country in the not-too-distant future.
Well, that would be nice, but you do know that where we live, the weather can trick you. It can say, oh, look, you're having a nice little spring-like day, but tomorrow it's going to be snowing again. So I think the metaphor is even more apt than you might at first suggest.
Turbulent weather, stormy weather. Maybe that will be our theme song, Jeff.
Yes, I like that. I want to talk to you about what is going on in the financial markets. I mean, I was reading the headline from the Wall Street Journal today. I mean, Trump is still threatening to basically bury China in tariffs. But it says Wall Street starts to speak out. Oh my goodness gracious me. Jamie Dimon, who is changing his tune, says, oh my goodness, this is going to raise prices and slow growth. And here's the weird thing. They're reporting that Elon Musk has even done a sort of a sideways critique, speaking out about Peter Navarro and, Apple has said that, the tariffs apparently are having some success. They might be moving some of their production out of China, but they're not bringing it back here. They're going to India. So when does the insanity stop? When does Donald Trump say, you know what, it was a great idea, but it didn't work out so well. Let's try something else.
Well, that's a great question. And the thing, I guess I'd make a couple observations. First, it's occurred to me that the business community, has sort of made a deal with the devil in the sense that they listened to Trump's economic message and they heard part of it, the part they want to hear, and the part that says tax cuts, the largest tax cut in American history is coming. There's going to be much less regulation. All that's great. But the third piece, which is, and we're going to have major tariffs, they sort of thought, well, he'll pull back. He won't really do that. He'll threaten it. Maybe he'll threaten it for a little bit and then walk away. And I guess they're finding out now that, what others have been saying for a long time, which is, Trump has been talking about tariffs for about 40 years. He has views that I think most economists would say are incoherent on tariff policy, but he believes them, with passion, without evidence, but also with passion. So I don't know how this plays out. Just watching, Trump had a photo op with Bibi Netanyahu just a little bit ago, and it was watching it, and it really kind of, I don't mean to be uncharitable, but it reminded me of kind of a dorm rap session. This was a few years ago in my history, where there's the person who's doing the most talking knows the least. And, what is emerging is this just kind of smorgasbord of kind of partial truths and not even partial truths and rumors and innuendos and aspirations. It was, and I'm thinking, and I don't purport to be a super expert on the economy, but at least I know when I'm hearing utter incoherence. And
well, that's
what
something
I heard.
The Wall Street Journal also pointed out. Apparently, over the weekend, Trump had a lot of his people out and about on talk shows trying to talk about the tariffs and what the plan was, et cetera, and so forth. But apparently, they all gave a different message. It was described as incoherent.
Yeah, and this was, Joan, let me digress just a little bit. I've been starting to do, you're still my absolute favorite talk show host, but I've started to do once a month a kind of an American update with a radio station in Adelaide, Australia. Woo. And so we did this last week, just on the eve of this big tariff announcement, and they were sort of pleading with me to tell them that that this was a coherent strategy, that this was part of a clear, coherent, well-staffed, disciplined process. And I had to tell them, that's not what's happening here. I mean, Donald Trump has a perspective that is not in any way shaped by evidence or fact, but he is going to push it. And they said, well, so what is the end game? And I guess to your first question, I don't know what it is. The markets have been tanking, significantly. I'm sure that has gotten his attention, although he won't say so. Business leaders are coming out. I just saw a poll a second ago which showed that, his approval is like 43, 53 opposed. I think right track, wrong track, well over 50% are saying wrong track. So I don't know what happens. Trump is not obviously in any sense a conventional politician. He obviously loves approval, and I'm sure that registers with him far more than he would let go, or acknowledge. But at this other hand, there is this kind of defiance. It's like, I'm going to hang in there, and I'm not going to back down. So I don't know what the end game is here. Several people. I heard several people speculate that, excuse me, literally Trump's staff is trying to figure out if there might be some kind of partial small win he can claim, jump on that, and then just pull back from this whole strategy and say, okay, I'll come back to it later. It's almost like his staff is saying, how do we get this guy to stop doing crazy stuff? And I don't know how it plays out. Trump, and particularly since he's not going to run for what we think not run for re-election again. He doesn't have the sort of pressures of an electoral campaign. But as I said, he's also very, very acutely sensitive to criticism. So I don't know how this plays out.
Well, the people of Australia must have been particularly confused because, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the Heard and McDonald Islands are considered part of Australia's territory. The two islands populated by seals and penguins who are now the beneficiaries of a Trump tariff. That's Australian territory.
Yeah,
what did they say to you about that? Should they, John, please explain why he's putting a tariff on the penguins?
Their concerns were more broader in the sense of because they are, very, very, first of all, I look to the United States for, security guarantees and so forth, but also is kind of a bastion of stability in the global economy. And Australia is, very dependent on the global economy, and anything that just throws the trading system into chaos is acutely frightening, terrifying to them. So there was this deep, deep sense of, my God, what is going on? And, and they were, of course, were particularly interested in what, how the regime would be changed for Australia, which at that point, it was a day or two before, and I didn't have any specific information, and they didn't either. So yeah, it was a kind of an interesting insight into just how the rest of the world is looking on in really terror. It's not, amusement. It's just utter terror, saying, it's like, you're driving across country with Dad, and all of a sudden you realize he has no idea where he's going. It's like, oh my God. And,
it isn't just our stock market. It isn't just the Dow and the NASDAQ that are going crazy. The Japan stock market, the Nikkei, we are so globally interconnected. And when I see these Trump supporters who are like, oh, well, we don't care if Canadians never buy our stuff again. We don't need them. You think? I don't know about that. I was talking to, I don't know if you're familiar with Terry Savage. She's been a financial columnist forever. And we were talking last week, and she was like, well, I just found out from the woman who owns my hair salon that prices are going to be going up because apparently most hair dye is imported. I don't know where it comes from, but it's imported. We have no idea how this is going to affect us and affect our daily lives and the costs that we pay for stuff that we had no idea came from somewhere else.
No, I think that's right. And I think also, and I think we've talked about this before, is that, you know, I think we're both surprised that Trump was reelected. But I thought, but the one piece of that I could maybe slightly understand was like, okay, Americans in concept, some Americans, at least 50% or 49%, you know, like the notion of disruption. They say the system is broke, everything's rigged, so let's just blow it all up. And so, I mean, I guess I understand the sort of base impulse like that. I don't understand how that translates into your voting practice. But so, I mean, I guess I sort of understood how a fair number of people are interested in the concept of disruption. What I'm increasingly curious about is, you know, when disruption, this gets to your point, when disruption hits their daily life, whether it's their beauty parlor or the price of food or the price of cars. I mean, I think Trump's numbers are going to be going down pretty darn steadily. And certainly if he doesn't reverse himself, and if the economy goes into recession, I mean, that's going to be, he can't blame Joe Biden for that one, although I'm sure he'll try.
Oh, absolutely. He will try. Absolutely. John, we need to take a break. And because I can't help myself, I'm going to have Paul replay something that we played at the top of the show. This is a guy from Canada who's a comedian. And he posted on social media, he dressed up as a penguin and announced that he was the prime minister for the penguins on the Heard and McDonald Islands. And he had an announcement to make as a penguin about the Trump tariffs. Of course, it's just ridiculous comedy. But I want to, Paul, play that and then just go to break.
Thank you for joining. As you are aware, U.S. President Donald Trump has imposed a 10% tariff on all exported goods from our sovereign, windswept homeland, the Heard and McDonald Islands. Now, some have described our territory as uninhabited, others as barren or inhospitable. Even more have described it in detail by saying, there are no humans here. These people are correct, except we are here. We have always been here, watching, standing, sometimes waddling. True, we may not export goods in the traditional sense, unless you count style, contempt, and the occasional puffin who is really, really lost. Stupid puffins. But it's the principle. To target our proud penguin nation with tariffs is a declaration, not of war. We're not saying that because we're penguins and not big on fighting. Hard to punch someone with flippers. But we are saying we know where the fish are. And we control the supply. Kinda. Maybe. I don't know. We're penguins. We say a lot of If President Trump believes that Heard and McDonald Islands pose an economic threat to the United States, we humbly suggest that he look inward. And possibly at a map that hasn't been sharpied yet. This is not the first time we have been underestimated. Actually, it may be. There's no way of knowing. Again, we're penguins. But let it be known, we are not simply just birds in little suits. We are birds in tuxedos. Speak off, Trump. Thank you. No questions.
Now back to Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
I'm joined by John Shaw, director of the Paul Simon Public Policy Institute. That's at Southern Illinois University. John, some people have been saying that that they're seeing what they are describing as cracks in the Republican support for Mike Johnson and Donald Trump. Do you see that? Do you see any cracks?
Maybe slight ones. I mean, I guess I have been really, really surprised. Well, let me check that. I mean, the whole Trump phenomena, has shown that that someone who's not even really a Republican can take over the party and push policies that are fundamentally contrary to what Republicans have been arguing for 75 years. And people have kind of embraced them and gone along with it. I think there was just a really powerful essay George Packer wrote in The Atlantic about the hollow men, he called them, the people who've basically put all of their values on hold to be, part of the Trump administration. And I think I do think that Republican lawmakers, have obviously, been hanging with Trump pretty closely. But then when you see these town hall meetings and where, an increasing number of Republican lawmakers are frightened to go home because of the reaction. So I don't know, certainly if the economy, the stock market continues to decline and the economy slows, it will be a very, very interesting test whether, the kind of proverbial Republican lawmaker, for so long he's been just terrified of Trump's base and what it will do to him or her if they deviate. But maybe there will be more concerned about their base and what they are saying about their kind of blind support. So I think the next, couple months are going to be really interesting in that regard. I mean, so far, to answer your question a bit more directly, I have not seen, a lot of, clear evidence of people peeling away, but you have to believe serious, quiet conversations are going on about, is this really sustainable for much longer?
Oh, well, that's the $50,000 question now, isn't it? And I can't imagine anybody saying, oh, yeah, absolutely. This is our new reality and it's going to be this way forever. I mean,
springtime in America, huh?
Oh, God. When Trump used his first administration to impose, I don't think he went much past 10% tariffs on anybody. Remember how the retaliation? I mean, Illinois farmers, China was the market for their soybeans. And China was like, the heck with you. We're going to buy our soybeans from Brazil. We're not going to buy any soybeans from you. And we may not ever in the future buy any soybeans from you. And then the farmers went to Donald Trump, and he ended up cutting them all checks that I believe did away with any kind of value that the tariffs were supposed to bring. And there are some people I've been reading who are predicting that that's what's going to happen. Industry by industry, people are going to be going to Donald Trump and saying, if you don't bail us out, we're not going to make it. We're not going to vote for you again. That there's going to start, like the car manufacturers, other manufacturers are going to start saying, hey, buddy, we need a bailout or we're going to go under. We're just making the threats. I don't understand how Trump didn't learn from that.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And it would be interesting, just the policy you described, which is just kind of ad hocery run rampant. I mean, just trying to, figure out what industry to bail out and what interest group to try to, ease their concern. I mean, particularly for, policymakers. And I think it's been more of the essence of conservatism is caution and prudence and not making radical changes and so forth. I mean, all the kind of, the clear values that, many of us maybe don't fully agree with or agree with, but at least it's a coherent position. You can agree with it or not. But I guess the thing is with Trump, I mean, it's just the incoherence that there's, he's sort of, he's done a couple things that have won over the conservatives, but the main thrust of his policy is not conservative. It's kind of chaotic as opposed to anything else. So yeah, it would be, I don't know what reaction would be to just industry by industry bailouts. Presumably that legislation would have to be passed by Congress. And that would be a pretty interesting test of just how this Trump coalition will hold together, because it probably will hold together to get past very deep tax cuts. I suspect that will happen. But when you start doing industry by industry bailouts, I mean, that is so anathema to what Republicans have been arguing for so long. I mean, it will be a really telling moment to see what the reaction is.
Tell me what you think is going to happen. I mean, I was told at the very beginning of the Trump administration, people smarter than me said, you know what? They've got the House, they've got the Senate. Don't even think that these tax cuts for the wealthy are going to be stymied. That's definitely, they've got the votes. They're going to do it. Just wrap your head around it. But now Donald Trump has said that he wants to either raise or eliminate the debt ceiling. And that's always been the club that Republicans use to beat up Democrats. Now the shoe seems to be on the other foot. Will Democrats use that as the club to beat up Republicans? Or since it's something that they've been wanting to get rid of for a while, will they just say, okay, yeah, sure, no problem, we'll get rid of it? What do you think is going to happen?
Well, for 25 years, I was a congressional reporter, and I covered budget policy quite a bit. And the debt ceiling has always been something that I've been deeply skeptical about because it was a mechanism that was created. I think it was like the Liberty Bond Act of 1917. But, I mean, it was created for a different era. And the thing is, it never, the debt ceiling is increased to allow for borrowing for policies that have already been enacted. I mean, it's never been a discipline to change policies from occurring. It's just a reaction to them. So I have never been a huge fan of the debt ceiling. And to be candid, both parties have used it pretty darn aggressively. I mean, it's been considered the must-pass bill. So it's given the minority party, a lot of leverage to try to slow things down. So, in terms of what is likely to happen, I mean, I think any attempt to kill the debt ceiling would be probably wrapped up into this reconciliation bill that will only require a simple majority to pass. And pardon me, I mean, I have to think that Republicans will probably go along with it. I don't even, but again, I mean, they've used it or they've talked about, some of them have talked about its virtues, but I think when if it's packaged with a big tax cut, they will set aside their concerns and approve it. And again, it connects to the other issue of just fiscal discipline. It just seems like the notion of large tax cuts that are unpaid for, are just going to explode the deficit. And it wasn't that long ago where, Republicans were lecturing, Joe Biden and Barack Obama about fiscal discipline. Once Donald Trump came to office, they've kind of put aside that call, except in the small number of cases where they're at least rhetorically pushing that line.
I'm joined by John Shaw, director of the Paul Simon Public Policy Institute. We are going to take a break and be back with more right after this.
Now back to Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
And I'm joined by John Shaw, director of the Paul Simon Public Policy Institute. We were talking about Republicans before the break, John. I want to talk about the Democrats now. At the beginning of the show, I played a sound clip from Cory Booker, who, of course, did that. I don't know if it was 20. If he hit 25 hours? I'm pretty sure he did.
I believe so, yeah.
Marathon on the floor of the Senate to just bring attention to the fact that Elon Musk and Donald Trump are tearing things apart. And he was interviewed by Jen Psaki, and he said, Americans are waking up. And I think we saw that this Saturday when thousands and thousands, supposedly nationwide, 5.2 million people took to the streets to protest what Donald Trump and Elon Musk are doing with our country. People have been wondering, though, it seems to have taken a bit for democratically elected legislators to figure out what the public wants of them and to start delivering it. And I remember seeing an interview on Rachel Maddow with Ezra Levin from Indivisible, and he said, remember, last time Trump was in office, the protests didn't start with the elected representatives. The protests started with the people. And once it was apparent that the people were really upset and not going to take this, he said that's when you started to see legislators speaking out. Is that sort of the phase we seem to be in right now, where people are angry and they're taken to the streets, and our democratically elected representatives are starting to figure out that business as usual ain't working for anybody?
I think that's fair. Although I do think, I guess I might have a different perspective than some on this. And that, I think that when the legislative session started in January, and Trump was sworn in on January 20th, the Democratic leaders faced a real conundrum in the sense that the Republicans had all control of all branches of government, and then there was a Republican Party that was more focused on protecting the president and his agenda than being institutional defenders and so forth. So even though, like in the House, they only were down by a few seats, when the Republicans are in total lockstep, the Democrats are not really going to have much of an impact on the policy debate. I think there's two pieces of this. One is to have a public response and public reaction. And I think that's really important. There's another piece that I don't know if it's going on. I think for the future of the Democratic Party, it better be, which is just developing policies that speak to the needs of the American people. And just in the last week, I've seen interviews with both Gavin Newsom and Rahm Emanuel separately on different shows who both use the words saying the Democratic brand is toxic. And that's obviously a really strong word. What do they mean by that,
do you think?
First of all, I think that overstates it. Again, Harris lost the election by, a percentage point. So it's, as someone who is running for, running a 100-day campaign, I think people tend to sort of overreact. And I don't know what toxic means. I listening to Rahm in his interview, I think it was on PBS, he was basically saying he thought the Democrats were focusing on the wrong kind of issues, the social issues, when it should be, much more tightly focused on economic issues. And I think even that's in some sense what AOC is starting to say and to do in her kind of tour, in which, she's putting together an argument that is just completely focused on economic populism, which to be, that's maybe an unfair way of putting it. Focusing on middle class economic issues and just how these inflation affects working families and all. So I'm rambling a bit, but I think the central thing is, I think there needs to be strong public reaction, but there also needs to be some really, really hard policy work that is being done behind the scenes or wherever it's occurring at universities, but just really thinking about ways to put together an economic agenda that the country supports and will embrace and will allow the country to just think about the Democratic argument as opposed to just dismissing it as elitist and out of touch and, woke and all that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious, you mentioned Rahm Emanuel and Gavin Newsom. What do you think of those guys and their future prospects?
Well, I watched. It's funny. I was watching Rahm with my wife. I think it was on PBS at the Christiane Amanpour show, and so we're just sitting there listening to him. And as soon as it ended, she turned to me. She said, "He's running for president," and it was just. It was. I didn't even ask the question. She said he's running for president, and it was just the way his. Even his body language and just the care, which is like, okay, there are 3 points. And, it struck me very, very clearly that he's at least going to explore a presidential run. And I think you and I were talking not so long about whether he was going to run for, the Senate seat in Illinois if it were to open up. But I think he has decided, and I think I might have said then that I just didn't see him as having a temperament that's particularly well suited for the Senate. But I think he's looking at it very, very seriously. And I think also Newsom is, of course, as well. So, and so is the governor of Illinois, Pritzker. And he's become a bit of a celebrity on the D.C. think tank circuit that's trying to look for coherent Democratic response to what's going on. So, yeah, I'm seeing a lot. And Mayor Pete, I think the fact that he, Secretary Buttigieg, I might say, has, by opting out of the Michigan race, has signaled to me at least pretty clearly that he's thinking about running for the White House come 28.
Well, but here's the thing that confuses me about that. Gary Peters is not running again, which opens up a seat from Michigan for the Senate. And the Senate is a really good place to launch a presidential campaign from. Why would he miss that opportunity? Pete?
I think, I think part of it, he might think that he needs to do a 4-year run. And I'm sure that, and it might also be, look at, day one on the campaign trail in Michigan, the first question was okay, come on, you're really running for president, aren't you? And he would have to at least muster the sort of, that is not my intention right now. And maybe he just thought that he would be doing it so many verbal gymnastics that it would even be demeaning to himself and the constituents. And he might just think, why, and I'll use this in air quotes, why waste 2 years exclusively in Michigan when I'm going to spend the next 4 years developing a national brand, even though I think I would argue that he's developed a bit of one. He's developed one. So
I guess my concern, if I were advising Pete, is, look, you were a relatively small-town mayor, and yes, you were tapped to be a transportation secretary, cabinet member, but, wouldn't his resume look a little better if Senate was on there as well? I mean, mayor and essentially a job that he didn't have to run for, that he was picked for. And as far as cabinet posts go, not even the most important one. Is that enough of a resume to run for president?
I think your argument would hold up for most of American history. But again, let's look at Donald Trump. It's not like, he was elected because people said, oh, my God, he has this vast expertise in government and so forth. I mean, I do think, and to go back even a bit, I'm thinking about, I think, indulge me for just a moment here. I'm thinking of the 1960 campaign in which JFK effectively, defeated Lyndon Johnson for the Democratic nomination. Johnson was a far, far more formidable legislator than Kennedy. That goes without saying. But there's this famous moment in the Los Angeles convention in 1960, and where Kennedy had a big lead, but it wasn't totally sewn up. And so he was at a joint breakfast with Lyndon Johnson, which was of the Texas and Massachusetts delegations. And so Johnson goes first, and he gives this long recitation about all that he's done to, move legislation and so forth. And it's a very impressive, almost unanswerable description. And then Kennedy gets up and he says, I've listened to Senator Johnson, and he's done all these things. I absolutely agree. I don't want to disrespect him in any way. So I think he should stay in his current job and be the Senate Democratic leader, and you should nominate me for president. So, it was one of these classic moments when he turned Johnson's, strengths into a disadvantage. And I do think that was in some sense a turning point in American politics, in which the whole notion of kind of resume and, is this person really ready for the job? I think that's taken on a diminishing importance, and culminating in, the election of Trump in 2016 and then 2024, where it's literally, in 2016 in particular, where literally it's zero government experience, zero, and people still voted for him. So I think the resume piece is less important than it once was. And I don't mean to be dismissive, because that was maybe too glib on my part, because, I believe, and I'm sure you do, that these jobs give you valuable problem-solving experience. How does government work? So it's not as if the Senate is just a resume enhancement. So I don't know Pete's innermost thinking, but it seemed to me when he went in the direction he did, he was basically saying, okay, I need to launch a 4-year campaign. Maybe he's down in the hustings every day, but I need to just sort of develop a national strategy and develop contacts across the country. I want to run in 2028, and even getting a seat in Michigan would not fundamentally advance my cause in a way that just working the country would. So.
John Shaw and I are going to take a break. We are going to be back with more brilliant political insights right after this.
Joan Esposito, live, local, and progressive on WCPT 820.
I'm joined by my good friend and apparently fellow radio professional, because he does a show with people in Australia. My colleague here, John Shaw, director of the Paul Simon Public Policy Institute. Hey, how did you connect with the people in Australia to do that radio show? Did they just reach out to you and say, oh, my God, we see you, we love you, we want you?
Well, no, it was very funny because some years ago I wrote a book called JFK and the Senate about Kennedy's Senate career. And then I wrote a second book called Rising Star, Setting Sun, which is about the Kennedy-Eisenhower transition. So I'm fairly well-schooled in Kennedy's political career. The one thing I know relatively little about is the Kennedy assassination. I mean, of course, I've read the basics, but I just have not been as totally transfixed with that, the Kennedy assassination, as many others have. I mean, I'm interested, but in a general way. Somehow I got on someone's list, and so when this new batch of documents came out on the Kennedy assassination, I was getting all sorts of requests to talk about it, and I was, I did a few of them with the not purporting to know more than I did, but just saying let's broaden it out and why is the Kennedy assassination important and so forth. So out of the blue, I got this invitation to have a conversation with this. It's basically kind of a Good Morning Australia radio show based in Adelaide. And I actually, back in my youth, I had lived in Australia for a year and a half.
Really?
I'd won a Rotary Scholarship, which is this wonderful scholarship in which you could go to the country of your choice, and you traveled around the country. You go to graduate school there, and then you traveled around the country giving speeches about life in your hometown. So I grew up in Peoria, so I had traveled around Australia. So I went to Australia. I went to the University of New South Wales, which is in Sydney. So I traveled around the country, and I just grew to really love Australia and be intrigued by it. So long way of saying, when they invited me to get the show, go on the show, I said, okay, sure. So we had this terrific conversation, and I even kind of regaled them with some of the things I remembered about Australian history. So they came back and said, hey, can we do this as a kind of a monthly segment? So that's what it was. So it was a lot of fun.
Very, very cool. So these days, when you look at politics, what catches your interest? What catches your eye? What is something that you think, man, I've got to follow that. I've got to keep an eye on this story?
John, the one thing that intrigues me, and I've loved history. The one thing that has intrigued me is just where the Democrats go from here. I mean, what do they do? And the one thing I'm curious about is what examples in history in which a party has been, sort of thrown out of power. What are the examples in which they've used their wilderness years in a really productive way to rethink, energize, and do some very, very honest soul searching, and also get back in the game politically, and also be a credible opposition party while they're preparing for the future. So, to me, it's an intriguing challenge. I mean, I haven't found, to be honest, super examples. I mean, I know talking to several people, they believe that after the Bush victory in 1988, following the two Reagan terms, George H.W. Bush, that this kind of period from 88 to 92, the Democrats did some really creative, soul searching and reassessing. Our friend Peter Fenn was a part of that, and he was telling me that Pamela Harriman had established this salon that had some fundraising, but also it triggered a really kind of thoughtful rethinking, reimagining of policies. So I guess that's one of the things that, and oftentimes, when you're in opposition, during the Bush 43 years, there was some rethinking about policy. So that's what is intriguing me, and I'm trying to figure out more about what is going on behind the scenes with some of the people we've been talking about, but also like AOC. I mean, I find her, in fact, this is the question I want to ask you. I mean, I think she's gearing up to run for president in 28. What do you think?
I think that she might have presidential aspirations. I don't think it's going to be 2028, though. I really don't. I think that she's right now. I mean, the stuff like she's doing when she did those appearances with Bernie Sanders. I think she, like Pete Buttigieg, she's in a building phase. But I think, and I hope, I guess I hope she sees things the same way. I think there is too much misogyny in our country right now to elect a woman to the presidency. And on top of that, she's young. You know, she isn't, 50 years old. She's not Amy Klobuchar or something like that. And Amy Klobuchar didn't, advance very far. I think that she's presidential material, but I don't think the world we live in right now is ready to elect a woman. And I think she's savvy enough to understand that. I don't know. That's my thought.
That's a very interesting perspective, and it makes a lot of sense. I guess my counter to that would be, I think in politics, and JFK, I think, had this acute sense of it, and I think Obama did too, is that the window of opportunity opens quickly and closes quickly. And, AOC is still, even though she's been on the scene for 4 or 5 years, still a fresh, charismatic presence. And if she waits 8 years, there will be there probably will be another young phenom who has kind of pushed their way to the front of the line. So I don't know. I feel like she's still. I think she has a coherent message. I think she's exciting. She's interesting. It's is it a slam dunk? Absolutely not. But again, and even the misogyny, I certainly would not question that. I agree with you 100%. But again, let's not forget, Harris came within a whisker of defeating Trump. Whisker maybe, but it came really close. And it might be after 4 years of what we're about to go through, the American people will say, we have got to reshuffle the deck, and we have to be more open to a different way of politics and government. So I don't know. If I were her, I would be looking at the race really, really carefully. I would be doing what she's doing, which is, traveling the country and finding opportunities. But I think it's interesting, Joan, too, that from what I've read, she doesn't seem particularly intrigued, even though there's positive polls that might give her a boost to take a run at Schumer. And I think she understands that for what she wants to do, the Senate really is not a necessary next step.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm not saying that I don't think she's competent. I think that I don't think we will see a female president in my lifetime. I really don't. It breaks my heart to say that, but I think there's a tremendous amount of misogyny. And I think that it is so important that the Democrats regain the White House after this disastrous administration we're going to live through. I frankly don't think we can afford to push the envelope. I think we have to pick a safe candidate who checks a bunch of boxes and has the best shot at winning. And I don't think that's a woman.
Yeah, no, that's. And I remember actually when you and I were talking right after Harris, got the nomination, we were talking about the Veep stakes, and you said, what do you think? And I threw out the name Gretchen Whitmer and saying, what a, interesting. You're like, John, come back to planet Earth. There's no way, 2 women on a ticket, in 21st century America is going to work right now. So, you've had a better sense on this than I have, but I think we both hope you're wrong. You may be right, in terms of that, but I would love to see. I think there's a lot of interesting faces there, and plus, I don't know what your thoughts on Harris. What do you think she is thinking about right now?
That's a very good question. I have no idea what she's thinking about right now. But if she does have any desire to run again in 2028, she better get her butt out there and start speaking to people and being a lot more public than she is. She can't, she can't just drop in at the last minute and say, oh, by the way, I'm running again, because, we're in the fight of our lives. And if she's not front and center right here, right now, forget about 2028. That's my humble opinion.
No, and I think I think I've been maybe a little bit more sparing of her than others in terms of not immediately jumping back into the debate. I mean, I thought that they're just in terms of having, first of all, she's probably exhausted and depressed as every losing candidate is. So, I thought, spending half a year just pulling back and rethinking life and so forth made some sense. But I think, we're reaching the point where it's time to reengage. And, I don't know if she's thinking about the California governorship or running for president again. I have to think one of those she's thinking about very seriously, maybe both of them.
Probably.
But I do think that she's...
John, we have done it again. We have talked ourselves out of time. I'm not running over into Patty's show just yet, but it's a near thing. John Shaw. I'm sorry. I'm having a senior moment. It is the Paul Simon Public Policy Institute. John Shaw is the director. And I always lose my sense of watching the clock when we talk, because it's such a fascinating conversation. And I hope we've competed adequately with Australia and that you'll come back again.
You have.
Okay.
Will do.
That's going to do it for me. Driving It Home with Patty Vasquez is up next. I will see you tomorrow at 2 o'clock, my friends. Good night.